Even if you didn't record players live, would you, and you wanted someone else to do your mix, would Pro Tools come into play then?
Yeah, yeah, you would still have. I mean, it would be a bit easier because you could technically also just give your mix engineer audio stems and the MIDI file, and then they could kind of create the Pro Tools session from that. So they can do that. Some people will charge you for that, though, so be aware of that. But I would still prepare Pro Tools sessions for them just to be nice to the team member.
Yeah, and it definitely seems like the more you know how to do yourself, the more money you can save if you need to.
Yeah.
And the nicer it is for the people around you in the scoring
Yeah.
sandbox, so to speak.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you can have, other people do this at the scoring stage or at the mixer studio or something, but they will, charge you hourly or daily. So this is a money saver if you can do it yourself. But also, it's always good. It's usually the last bit where you get to check your work. That's also the important part to me. That's actually why I do prefer to do it. Or if I have someone else do it, I will still play through every cue one last time, just to make sure there's not a misprint, there's nothing missing, there's no distortion anywhere, or a pop, or a click, or anything that might have happened. Because if I just use offline bounds in Cubase or Logic, and I send off the stems, I'm not really checking my audio, do I? I'm not really making sure there's no mistake in there. So this to me is always kind of the last playthrough where I'm like, all right, everything is 100% correct. I can send it off now. That's for the scoring stage, but that's also for the dub stage where I play through it one last time. And I know what I'm sending them now, that's what's going to go into the movie. So to me, it's just one last quality check to make sure there's nothing wrong in what I'm sending out. Because if there is, and they don't notice it, because they have a million other things to do with the sound and not just check my music, then, that goes into the movie and that's printed forever into the movie. And then I'm gonna be really upset.
And yeah, that's it's nice to have that control. What is the reasoning behind individual stems for the string instruments while only high and low for the woodwinds?
That's at your discretion. It depends on the piece. I don't know why I did it like this. Sometimes I split out the woodwinds. It kind of also depends how we record and if I need to be able to mute the individual woodwinds or not. Because you can also see I combined violins 1 and 2 into one stem. I don't always do that. If they do fundamentally different things, I don't combine them. So this is really also what is perc high, mid, low. That's really kind of at your discretion, especially mid percussion. That's like toms and snares, but whatever falls into these categories, it's really kind of, I always tell my additional writers, use common sense, what makes sense in this context, because, sometimes fewer tracks is better, but sometimes you need access to all of the instruments. Like some cues really look confusing. This is kind of a normal amount of stems that you would see with a mixing engineer. Like this would be pretty, it's usually like 10, 15. But yeah, there have been cues where I really had to separate everything out because we needed control over every element. And so then all of a sudden you have like 50 tracks. So yeah, it's really at your discretion, depending on also what the woodwinds are doing, if it's solos, if they're playing together as a section. So yeah, there's not really a hard and fast rule to that.
Follow-up question about the stemming would be, under which circumstance would you need control over each instrument? Maybe if you could give an example or something.
For example, I did have a video game thing that just was very sound designy and very creative in the mix. So the more creative you want to be in the mix, the more control you need to give the mix engineer. This was specifically something, for example, where I had to, I had long strings and short strings and harmonics and all kinds of different elements in the same section going on. So I just needed to separate that out so that we can, if I have an ostinato going in the same section that also has, say, harmonic sustains going, I need control over these two different elements. to make them louder or softer where I need. Or also say I have sections in the woodwinds where they all play together and we also record woodwinds. We would just layer those together. But imagine I have different woodwind solos. Then I need to be able to mute the solos from the live solos because we're not going to layer those on top of each other. Or something we recently had, I gave my additional writers a bit of shit for that. So we had a session and we did not have a bassoon, but we had a bass clarinet. And they just kept printing a woodwind low stem with a bassoon and bass clarinet printed together. But we had a live bass clarinet. So now we had no way of muting the bass clarinet from that woodwind low stem. So I was like, how are you guys expecting me to do magic? So they had to reprint their low woodwinds because they kept printing the bassoon in there as well. And I was like, no, we need the bassoon, but we don't need the bass clarinet unless it's a 2D context. So, it's kind of common sense. Thinking forward about what will you need to do in the mix with this piece. And so what elements do you need to be able to mute or control in the volume?
And we have a clarifying question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
She assumes that all of these stems you're printing for recording, they will be passed on to the mix engineer for mixing and blending with the live elements? Question mark?
Yes. So what some people do is they will just have one woodwind track, one brass track, one percussion track, and one violin track for the recording session. And they leave reverb on it and everything. I've done this for some composers. And then those stems would be discarded for the mix. And then they would send these types of stems. So I'm basically bypassing that step. These are all dry mixing stems already. So these are going to go exactly as they are to the mixing engineer because I don't want this extra step in between. And as long as you're organized like that, nobody at the scoring stage is going to complain because this is obviously a lot of tracks to send to them. But sometimes it's also really helpful because we had a score recently where we needed a lot of mixed meters. And so actually having control over the percussion elements was really helpful. So the players could sync a bit better with the percussion.
And question from the chat, do you always leave an empty bar at bar 1?
It's 2, actually, yes. You always leave 2 empty bars at the very least. There's clearly some kind of upbeat into bar 3 here because you need the click. It doesn't say it on the score, but you can see it on the score as well. There's 2 empty bars and the upbeat into bar 3. They just all need to be on the same page about this. If I didn't have these 2 empty bars, it would say 8 free up here, which is common session speak for 8 empty clicks. But yeah, I always just do the thing where I just leave 2 empty bars. Some people like to leave 5 empty bars at the beginning because you need the count into the music start. So my music start is just always bar 3, but different composers do it differently. You could theoretically have the music start be bar 1 and then start the click at -1. But I don't like to venture into that. I'm just like, let's just count from bar 1, and bar 1 and 2 are just going to be empty. So much easier than that.
Why do you have a stereo and a 5.1 track, please?
That's just the standard delivery. I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes I'm assuming sometimes they're going to want to check something. It's not the most necessary. It's just the standard to also deliver a stereo fold down of the surround mix. Why they need that, I don't think they're using that often. They would be using the 5.1 and then create their own stereo fold down if they need it. But it's just something we give them because we have it anyway. Because I need the stereos to listen to the mixes anyway. So,
Got it.
And I need the stereos as well for the soundtrack album and all that stuff.
And a question about sending and sharing these files. Just curious how you zip and deliver sessions if the file's too large or very large. what is your recommendation on sending and sharing these kinds of large files?
I mean, you can also create RAR files, of course. That's what I would then do. I've had that issue. I mean, on Windows, it's not an issue. I don't know why, but Windows handles zip files better than Mac. Mac sometimes has trouble with zip files that are bigger than 2 GB. I mean, in theory, what you could do, if you're 100% sure about your edits, what you can do is consolidate these files and then get rid of all the other takes that you didn't use. And that would shrink the file size as well. I've done this before where, I would just click on all these, and then I'm not going to do it now because that's going to create this is going to take forever. But that shortcut I used earlier, consolidate, would just create one long audio file for each of these and then just get rid of everything you didn't use. But yeah, otherwise create RAW files. Or, I mean, my mixing engineer he lives close by, so I could also just drop it on a hard drive and then drive it over, or he can pick it up or something. So that's not super uncommon either.
I'm sure it's a little bit complicated with COVID and things, physical drives, but it sounds like there's always a way.
Yeah, I mean, what we've also done is, if the studio pays for it, we can also express, what's it called? Here in LA, it's called A1. It's delivery service.
Oh, like
Like
a courier? Messenger?
Courier, yes, that's the word I was looking for. Like a courier service where you literally just take it and, the person comes to your house, they take it, and then they deliver it to another house. It's expensive, but I mean, you only do it once, so whatever. It's like $40, I think. Something like that. Which for a studio is not a tragic amount of money.
No.